Hello again, year 11. Hope you are good. Hope you're coping okay with your online learning. And welcome back to another wee virtual lesson. We are going to crack on with lesson 6 today. Nearly there, nearly at the end of this rivers topic. Only one more to go, and then we can think about doing some kind of assessment for your rivers topic. Okay, so this particular lesson is quite long. This might be a longer video, but that's fine. You can pause and you can take it easy and work your way through it at your own pace, which is quite good doing it this way, I suppose. So grab your textbook or your notes. Sorry. Again, if you don't have this at home with you, you can just do it on a blank piece of paper. You can print these pages off if you're able to. So we're starting lesson 6 on page 38, and it goes all the way through to page 51. It's quite a lengthy lesson, but as I say, you can just split it up and take it bit by bit. So let me make this bigger and we'll make a start then. So in lesson 6, we're thinking about the causes and the impacts of flooding. So flooding is an element which occurs in rivers, and that's going to make up a big part of this particular lesson and this topic. So the first thing I want you to do is to look at the picture that I've put on the lesson and think what could have caused the river below to flood. And hopefully the most obvious thing that everyone always thinks is too much rain, and that is absolutely right. Too much water, too much rain in the river will cause it to overflow and burst its banks, and that's 100%. That is true. However, there's a lot more to that. There's a lot more to it, and that's what we're going to be looking at throughout this lesson. So there's so many different factors which can cause a river to flood, and the way I always get people to think about this is if you have two rivers which are very, very similar in two different drainage basins, and the exact same amount of rain falls over this river and this river. However, this river floods and this one doesn't. Why might that be? So that's what we're going to be looking at then in this lesson. So the very first thing that you need to do in your notes is fill in a few missing words on this page. That's page 38. So this is just a little bit of background information about flooding, basically what I've said. So I'm not going to read that to you. You can pause me and you can fill in the missing words. The main thing from this slide that you need to take away is this bit at the bottom. Now that's what we're going to be doing with our causes of rivers flooding, is we're going to be able to split it into two different categories. So human and physical causes of flooding. And that says that on your page as well. So human causes of flooding are, well, the clue's in the name, it's to do with people. It's caused by the activities that humans do, and then your physical causes are natural, so things which occur in nature. So what you also need to do then on this first page of notes, page 38, is I want you to watch the video attached to this slide. You can click there and it will take you to a video on the internet. And what I want you to do is I want you to brainstorm from this video some of the different causes of flooding. So what you have then on page 38 is this little table in the middle here, and you should then be able to split those causes that you should recognize from this video into those two categories. And then the key there is for you to remind you that human is to do with people and physical is to do with the physical landscape, so climate and nature. So have a go at that, pause me and see what you can come up with then, and if you can categorise them into those two different categories. Once you've done that, then there is a challenge question at the bottom to get you to think about this from a different angle and to perhaps link into some of the stuff that we've looked at in the previous lessons. So it says, how could both a lack of rain and too much rain both cause a river to flood? And I'll give you a little hint to that. So too much rain is going to cause the ground to become saturated. Hopefully you remember that term from like lesson 1, lesson 2 in rivers. So if the ground is saturated, it's full of water, why would that cause a river to flood them? And then the lack of rain would be where the ground is really hard, really dry. Um, if you were to pour water onto a hard piece of ground, chances are it's not going to soak in straight away because it's so rock solid. It will probably just sit on top, or if it's on an angle, it might just like slide on down the hill into the river. So think about that. Why would that cause the river to flood? And then why would the water or the ground being full of water also cause it to flood? Right, once you have done that first page, then we get into our first little bit of theory and note taking. So before we complete page 39, I'm going to show you what's on the PowerPoint then and explain the logistics around this part of the lesson. So I have these two slides which are visually representing the main physical and the main human causes of flooding that we will be looking at. Global warming being one of the main human ones. Global warming is mostly caused by people burning fossil fuels, causing sea levels to rise, and that's depicted by the polar bear. And also on that, whenever we say sea levels rising, we're talking about ice caps melting. So if the ice caps melt, there's more water going into the oceans. That causes sea levels to rise. That's obviously then going to impact rivers because there's going to be more water in that water cycle that we talked about in lesson 1. Urban growth, so that is where people build cities. We lay down cement. We cause grounds to become impermeable because it's not going to allow rainwater to soak through. So if we grow urban areas, in other words, we build towns and cities, that will cause rivers to be impacted because rainwater cannot soak into the ground in an urban area because it's impermeable, it's cement, it's tarmac, it's not going to allow any water to soak in the way it would in a field or a forest area. River management, so that would be where people come along and we alter the river, we change its course, we make it faster because we've changed the layout of the actual channel, and that will definitely have an impact on the river. And then the last one, deforestation. Trees don't just get cut down by themselves, people have to do that, so that is why that's a human cause. And the reason that that is a cause is linking us back to lesson 1 or 2 where we talked about infiltration and how the process of infiltration catches, like trees catch rainwater and that might hold it for a while, and then we classify trees and vegetation as a store, and that would mean that that water in the water cycle stays there for a while, and then it might then after a while pass on to the river and rejoin the water cycle that way. So if we cut down trees, we take those stores away, then that's going to have an impact on how quickly how quickly rain would fall and then reach the river. So same again applies for this slide, only this is our natural causes for flooding. So at the top there you have precipitation, that's quite straightforward. So too much rain or rain which is prolonged is going to cause flooding of the river because the river won't be able to handle that much rain. Land use, so if it says there land without vegetation doesn't intercept water, so it might just be an area of land that's naturally just grassy and there's not very many trees, so that will impact the rate of interception. Bottom left hand corner, soil and rock, so that's basically the type of soil that a land area is made up of. So some soils are more impermeable, some rocks and soils can become more easily saturated, they can allow more or less water, and basically so it depends on the rock type and the soil type and stuff. So it says there, once they're full of water, surface runoff runs into the rivers. And then the last one, bottom right hand corner, steep slopes. So that is essentially the relief of the land. Drainage basins where valley sides are steep will return water to the river very quickly. So if you have water running down a steep valley side like that, it's going to go to the river very quick, as opposed to like a nice gentle valley side like that. So the time in which it takes rainwater to get to the river channel is a big part of this. So if you speed that up, that will impact the likelihood of a flood. So the stores that we talked about in a few lessons back, so your vegetation, your glaciers, your your groundwater, if they're taken away and there isn't any stores and it's just clouds, rain, straight to the river, that's going to cause a flood because the river can't handle all of its water all at once. It likes to have its water spread out around the drainage basin in different areas. So this is our first little bit of note taking then. So I'll explain this, I'll bring this all up at once and explain why I've laid it out like this. So in the exam, you will not just be asked name one physical cause of flooding. This will be more likely a 3-4 mark question, and you might be asked specifically, so it might want a physical or it might give you human. But what you have to do here is your statement, consequence, elaboration exam technique that we talked about in class. So it's kind of like your P structure that we use as well. These are your physical causes of flooding. So this is your statement. So in the question, in your answer to the question, your statement is, okay, one physical cause of flooding is heavy rainfall, like in thunderstorms. But that would only be 1 mark. So always say to yourself, so what? So that's your statement. Your consequence is this column, and then your elaboration is this column. So if you start off and you say, right, my statement is one physical cause of flooding is heavy rainfall, like in thunderstorms. Your consequence is, well, this causes excessive surface runoff. And there in bold, I have included a specific piece of terminology that an examiner always loves to say. Always include this, show off whenever you can. So heavy rainfall causes more surface runoff, and that results in flash flood. So your elaboration part of your question is always going to link it back to the question. You're going to link it back to what it's actually asking. So this is, you know, causing flooding, flash floods. All of this side of this slide is your elaboration, and they're all pretty much the same thing. This is all going to be flood, and the same is going to occur on the human side of things as well. So you'll see that my elaboration, I've just put 1 box. So you could do the same thing but with a different cause. So impermeable underlying rock, that's your statement. Your consequence is, well, that reduces infiltration. Again, a nice specific piece of terminology to show off with. Reduces the infiltration rate into the ground, which increases your surface runoff, shown off twice there. And then your elaboration is, well, this causes high risk area for flooding, or you could just say this causes flooding. This consequence is the same for that statement. So frozen ground and impermeable rock is essentially the same thing. So if ground is frozen and loads of rain falls, it can't get through. It's impermeable and can't infiltrate, so therefore more surface runoff. Like with anything, and you're given options like this in your notes, pick 1 or 2 that you like and that you will most likely remember, and then use it going forward. You're never going to be asked to list all of the physical causes of flooding. Your buzzwords, your terminology that I've put in bold is going to apply throughout whatever one you choose, so it doesn't really matter. Pick one that you'll remember and you feel comfortable enough to be able to explain. Same again for your human. So the main ones that we're going to be looking at: deforestation, urbanisation, narrowing of a river, and building levees. Same applies. So those are your statements. So if we talk about deforestation, I like deforestation. That's probably the one I would pick. It's the most memorable for me. So you can explain what it is. Deforestation, cutting down trees. So there's less root support in the soil. So there's one consequence that could have. There's less water being used by plants because they're not there to soak it up. And then the show off word is interception. So rain isn't caught by the leaves. There's a lack of interception, in other words. So that is essentially explaining why that is a human cause. And then, like I said in the last slide, well, that causes more surface runoff, that causes flooding. So you're essentially repeating the question and you're linking it back to the overall purpose of what you have been asked. So same again, choose whichever one you think you would remember best. But as I say, you can read them, you can write them into your page 39 yourself, and then once you've done that, you'll probably fancy one or two after having written it down that you think you would remember most of all. There we go. So this next part is more of the same thing. So like I always try to do, I like to try and include theory in different ways. So if you're a visual learner, you will like the little diagrams, those. Like me, I'm a visual learner, so I would definitely like take heed to those. These parts of your notes are just filling in words. Now, the good part of this is the fact that I have put it into a full sentence, a full paragraph of an answer. So this is exactly what you would write if you were asked about a physical cause of flooding and you chose precipitation or land use. This is what you could write. So you can pause me here and you can fill in then the missing words for this particular slide. After that slide then, I bring you back to the little image and I've put a blank version of that image down below. So if you're a visual learner, this will help you. So in those little boxes, scribble in those reasons, those physical causes of flooding then in this diagram. And look at the diagram, look at what it's pointing to, like that will help you remember that steep slopes looks like that. So it makes sense that it would cause a flood. And then same again for your human causes of flooding, missing words, copy them in. And then this is the same format again. This is essentially exactly what you could write in the exam. And then you have your little images explaining the physical causes of the human causes of flooding, sorry. So copy those in as well. Then you have your activities that you should now be able to do independently. Normally I set this as a homework. You'll see it says at the top here, homework for the next lesson. However, you can do this. Obviously, everything's homework at the minute. So you can do this in your own time, obviously, before the next lesson is due. So I'll explain what you actually have to do with these, and then you can crack on with those. So I'm going to talk you through this page first. This is page 42 in your booklet, and it's the one on the right hand side of the screen. So a couple of tasks. Task 1 says not only do you need to know the different reasons why a river floods, you also need to know which causes are physical and which are human. Use the key to color code the following list into either physical or human. So you have a bullet point list of many of the different causes that we've talked about in the last few slides, and you just have to color code them to be able to recognize what makes something human and what makes something physical. The only thing I would say is my color code here hasn't printed out very well, so yours is probably the same if you have your booklet that I gave you. The photocopying didn't really work there, so it's actually 2 shades of orange. However, throughout this particular lesson, I refer to physical causes as blue and human causes as orange. So change that to represent that. You can see it on the screen, the colour that it's supposed to be. But like always, if you don't have those colours at home with you, you can just write physical or human beside it. It does the same thing. Then in task 2, it says pick one physical and one human cause from the list about and explain fully how it causes river flooding. Use specific geographical terminology in your answer. Now, if you need to flick back then to these slides, these are really good for mentioning those pieces of terminology that I'm asking you for. So those words in bold are specific show-off words that I'm always harping on about. So use those. You'll need to pick one of each, so you might choose the ones that you like the best. And then task 3, note down some of the potential reasons for these 2 floods. So the picture on the left is to get you to think that that is a more rural area perhaps. So it could be something to do with the soil type. It could be perhaps that the valley sides are really steep. You can kind of see in the background that there's like a hill. So think outside the box. What things could potentially have caused that? You wouldn't write that it's an urban area because you can't see evidence of that, but what sensible causes can you put down for that one? And then the picture on the right is urban area. So you're going to be talking about the permeability of the ground. You're going to be talking about the fact that it's an impermeable surface like tarmac. What else? Yeah, so that's to get you to recognize those things from pictures, and that is what the next task is all about. So you can see across page 43 and 44 you have 6 different pictures showing the causes of flooding that we've talked about. So just in case you can't make out what these pictures actually are, I will talk you through each one really quickly. And what you have to do on these pages is state the main factor which would cause a flood from that picture, state if it's physical or human, and then explain why. So you're linking in everything that all the notes from this lesson. So the first one is going to be steep valley sides. The second one is showing heavy prolonged rainfall. That picture, and everyone can never make out what that is, that's supposed to show frozen ground. So I want you to mention like the permeability of that ground, that soil. The next one is an urban area. So what kind of surfaces do you have there, and how would that impact the permeability? The next one is a glacier. So what if it melts, and what causes it to melt? And then the last one is an area of deforestation. So those trees aren't there anymore, so what can happen? And then 45 and 46 are mind maps, basically just summarising everything that I've told you so far, so you can use them however you wish. Then on page 47 we have our case study. So this is where the case study fits into the rivers topic. And the rivers case study is talking about causes of why a particular river within the British Isles flooded. So for this case study, we talk about the Somerset Levels, which is an area in southwest of England, and it happened in 2014. And the main point of this case study is causes of the river in that area to flood, and it's building on the theory from this lesson that we've talked through. Before you do any writing, then there is 2 little links on this slide that you can click on. You can watch those 2 videos; they're really good. And the first bit of writing for your case study, like always, we have a nice little double-sided summary sheet for the case study. The first thing you do, as always with a case study, is you get your background information, because that's the first thing you're going to start to write about in the exam. It sets the pace, and it shows the examiner that you know what you're talking about. Yeah, it just sets you up really well. So you always want to include a few little facts about your background information. Now, I've got your background information for you. I have summarised it here. However, if you watch those videos and you realise that there's something nice in those videos that you want to include, by all means, scribble it in there. So your background information is basically saying where you're talking about. So you mentioned the case study area there, Somerset Levels. It's a low-lying area, southwest of England, has a really high natural water table. It's in an area of poor drainage, so it floods. Then you have another few figures to include there. So you're saying when it flooded, and then there's a nice figure there, saying exactly how many hectares of farmland was flooded in 2014. So you can copy that in. You can use the videos from the previous slide if you want to include anything extra for your background information. And then the main bulk of your case study is the causes of flooding. So we have split it into 2. So on your page 47, let me get me out of the way so I'm not blocking anything. On your page 47, I've done this out like so. So there's 3 physical causes and there's 2 human causes. I've put a couple of little images, little diagrams. Hold on, I think I've put them on this. Yep, there they are there, to hopefully prompt those visual learners amongst us. So unsuitable surfaces is a physical cause. It's a natural thing. So it's a low-lying land area. So it's close to the sea, it's close to the river, so it's most likely going to flood. It has grassy vegetation. Now, what that means is there's not very many trees. The vegetation is just mostly grassy. Now, grass does not intercept rainwater very well. It doesn't hold that much water, as opposed to having loads of trees, loads of branches, loads of leaves, which can soak up and hold loads of water. So this area does not have that. You would refer to this area's vegetation as being grassy. So I've said there, it doesn't help with interception. It has impermeable clay, so that's the soil type of the area. It doesn't soak up very much water, so that's a really good piece of terminology to include there. The next physical cause is that throughout the time frame that the case study is talking about, there was quite severe winter storms, so you could give a nice little figure here about how much rain fell exactly. And then tides. So the area is quite close to the sea, and if it has high tide, the tide, like anywhere really, will back up a river. If you have a high tide, it's up close to the ground level. And the same applies then for rivers. It will back up a river channel if it's a high tide. So that's what it's saying here. So high tides cause the water in the rivers to back up the river Parrot. That's a really good point to include there. So you're actually mentioning the name of the river involved, and that will score you points in the exam because you're being specific. It says then, so flood water physically can't leave the area if the sea is pushing the water all the way back up the river again. And then same applies for the next slide, which is your human causes. So we've only got 2 human causes. First one is no dredging. So what dredging is whenever people go into the river with big diggers and they remove any material from the river channel so that it allows more water to fit into the channel. It's like, imagine you ran yourself a bath and you started throwing in loads of muck and loads of silt and gunk and everything. That water in your bath would start to rise because you're taking up too much room. So that happens in river channels, and dredging allows for more room to be created by removing all of that gunk, and it helps prevent a river from flooding. So within this case study, it says that the river had not been dredged properly in 20 years, so it was full of silt. So that's material which would have been eroded from further up the river channel. So it couldn't hold very much water then. That's quite an easy one to remember, I think, because it's quite unique, especially if you imagine going into a river with a big digger and taking out all of that silt and stuff. Right, so it says here nearby urbanization. So in other words, near the river is a town or a few towns. So it says that houses have been built in this area and that area nearby. So if you were able to mention the names of the towns, that would score you some points. So water drains quickly because of impermeable surface, goes to the river quicker, making it more likely to flood. And that's it. So that's the end of the case study information. And what I've done at the bottom of page 47 is I have given you what the exam question for this case study would be worded like. So it says, explain the causes of flooding in an area of the British Isles that you have studied, 8 marks. And then I've said, so you'll need to use some of your background information to start off your answer and then split your answer into 2 main sections, physical and then human causes. So at a later point in the booklet, you'll be given the opportunity and the space to write out an answer for that case study question. But this is not the end of lesson 6. We're going to keep going now with the next part, which is on page 48. It says the positive and negative impacts of flooding on both people and the environment. So one last little bit of theory for this part of the exam, and then that's the end of this lesson. So you've got a bit of information there on the lesson PowerPoint. Not going to read it to you, but what I am going to do is I'm going to explain the task that you have to do on page 48. So I've said on page 49, there's lots of different impacts of flooding on both the environment and on people. They are also split into positives and negatives. Cut each impact out and place it into the correct side of the correct table below. Now, what that looks like then, oh no, that's the answers. What that looks like in your booklet, hold on, page 49. I've dropped mine. Is this. So like always, if you don't have scissors and glue at home, you can just write these out. But what you have to do with these is you have to put them into this page. Now, what I've done is I've split it into 2 different tables. One table is talking about the impacts on people, and the other one is talking about the impacts on the environment. And then I've went one step further and I've split that into 2 as well. So the left hand side is positive impacts, and the right hand side is the negatives. So what I would do if I'm cutting them out is I would split them first of all into either being about people or the environment. Then I would split them even further and I would say, is it good or is it bad? And that should allow you to fill in that table. And if you don't have scissors and glue, you can just copy them in. Now, the answers then are on the following pages, so try it yourself first, and then you can come back and check that you got it right. So there is your answers for the people one, and there's your answers for the environment one. And that's it. The last wee thing at the end of this lesson is a little quick recap where in your notes you're given this as well. And what you have to do is you have to read through each one of those impacts and decide if it is positive or negative, first of all, for this column. So you can just write P or N. And then the last thing is, well, is it about people or is it natural? Is it impacting the environment? And that is it. That's the end of lesson 6, this one is. So like I say, this is a really big lesson. There's quite a lot of parts to it. Split it up, pause me and go back and forward, and you can work this whatever way you want. But just make sure then that you're filling in all of your notes and you're doing all of those homework tasks in your own time, and obviously then send me them through so I can mark them and can make sure that you've done things right then. And that's it, only one more lesson to go. I'll upload another video for you for it. And yep, keep safe and keep busy, and I'll see you in the next video.